In fact, there was another, not to stay on the topic of beer, although I know New Hampshire, believe it or not, in New Hampshire, I found out per capita we consume the most beer of any country,
really?
Of any state in the country.
Really?
So, yeah. So
my husband might argue that. He's from Wisconsin, where all the breweries used to be.
Tell him to look it up.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
We actually have
that has to be a shift, huh? Somewhere along the line.
We have a dynamic microbrew and craft brew industry in the state that's really starting to percolate, no pun intended, but it's really becoming fascinating. But I was visiting the Woodstock Inn last week, and they actually have a brewery in their inn. But because
they're in a big expansion right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they are. But they were telling me about, because of some statute that's on the books, because there's this brewery attached to the inn where there's a restaurant, they're not allowed to do outside catering. So they were looking at getting into the catering business, but because of these crazy regulations, they're not allowed to do it.
Yeah, that is a crazy regulation.
Yeah, so there was a commission that was formed in the legislature this year, actually last year, but it's looking at all of these regulations on small businesses. And I would say whatever recommendations they come out with, at least 50% of them we should implement right off the bat to say, look, we're going to be a business-friendly state here. We're going to do away with a lot of these onerous regulations on small businesses, and we're going to lower our corporate tax rate because we want more business in the state of New Hampshire. You know, I talk a lot about keeping our young people here. The fact of the matter is that we're losing our young people at an alarming rate. We have a higher median age than the state of Florida now. We passed Florida last year in terms of our median age.
That's incredible, yeah.
It is incredible because as our population gets older, healthcare costs are only going to continue to increase as well. But, you know, there's no reason for our young folks to be leaving. I mean, we've got great schools here, you know, Dartmouth College, I've often mentioned, UNH, the Whittemore School of Business, you have Plymouth State, Keene State, St. A's, so many good schools. So our young folks are going to school here, but then they leave because the jobs aren't here. You know, the good, sustainable, high-paying jobs in manufacturing, in the high-tech industry, financial services, healthcare services. We're not doing enough to attract those kind of jobs to the state, and at the same time, we're not doing enough to help them grow. You know, what those industries want to see is the skilled labor pool. And if they see that we don't have enough students going into those areas, they're not going to stay here in New Hampshire. And that's why we've got to get smart about making sure our students are going on a career path to go into these industries. We're going to tell them, hey, look, these are where the jobs are in the future. This is where, if you're taking out $100,000 in loans, you can get into one of these jobs and actually be able to pay the loans back, as opposed to going into a field where you're maybe only going to make $15,000 when you come out of school, and there really isn't a market for whatever that particular degree of study is. You know, we really have to give them a reality check about where those jobs are. Trades, it's the same thing. You know, we've got a deficiency in the trades area. And there's good high-tech trade jobs out there that don't have enough workers. They're paying $50,000, $60,000, but there's not enough students going into the trades. Part of that, I think, is a stigma that we've put on trades jobs, especially at the high school level. You know, we push so many kids to get their four-year degree. Well, for some kids, yeah, that's good. That's a good path for them. But for others, you know, that are good with working with their hands, we shouldn't discourage them from going into the trades here if that's where their talents are. And so we need to give them more opportunities. And actually, you know, financially, it may be a benefit for them to do that because they can have their license after 2 years. They've taken out way less in loans, and they can go right into a job after. So there's ways we can be very smart about and strategic about, but there's ways to keep our young people here and really get New Hampshire moving into the 21st century.
Okay, and I'm going to veer off just a little bit because there's so many issues that people are interested in. Energy not only would affect business, obviously, but would also affect all of us as Bedford residents. Certainly the cost of energy is a big concern to all of us. I'm just going to throw a couple of things at you. I do know that EPA mandates have been a headache for everybody. And recently they mandated or are about to mandate that the whole Merrimack Station up in Bow is going to have to do a whole new cooling system at $112 million.
That's right.
Now, I recognize that as governor, you can't supersede something like the EPA, but what can you do to kind of pull them back and say, whoa, this is crazy?
I'll tell you what I'd do, Kathy. I'd call them up and say, you know what? Until you start basing your decisions on current data, we're not going to comply with this.
Okay.
And if you don't like it, you know, come after us for it. But the fact of the matter is that the EPA right now, this mandate you're talking about, okay, It's based on data from 40 years ago. And they're looking at, the health of the Merrimack River 40 years ago.
Right.
It's drastically different
yes, it is.
than it is today.
Yes.
But you've got some bureaucrat down in Washington that's checking off boxes, and they're saying, okay. And that's the thing that kills. They don't care. They don't care about the ratepayer here in New Hampshire.
And obviously, we would have to pick up the cost of that.
Of course we would. Of course we would. They're not paying for it.
Right, right.
But they don't care that we pay some of the highest electric rates in the state of New Hampshire. I mean, that's killing us both on the consumer end. I hear it all the time. People are sick and tired of paying high energy prices in this state. And it's killing us from a competitive standpoint from bringing businesses in here.
Right.
Businesses that have a large energy footprint, they look at New Hampshire and they go, you guys are nowhere near competitive. And that's why I have called for a long-range energy plan. We have a 10-year transportation plan in the state. There's no reason why we shouldn't have a 10-year energy plan.
On that line, and this issue will probably be still going on in the fall, I would guess, the whole Northern Pass.
Yeah.
Where are you on that?
Well, I've said as it had been proposed, I was against it. Because one, I don't think for that project they should be taking land by eminent domain.
Right.
And number two, where they were proposing to put all the towers, I mean, there are rights of the private property owners, and it was going to significantly devalue the land of those private property owners where they're going to put these towers.
Do you think the whole thing should be killed, or do you think it needs to be modified?
I think we need to modify it. I think we need to look for alternatives, whether that's burying the lines in some areas or maybe having a corridor, an energy corridor, similar to what Maine has done, where the public utilities lease the land from the state of New Hampshire, and that the state develops a corridor somewhere where it makes sense, where you can put a lot of these lines, and then the state would actually get paid for it because the public utility would lease it from the state. But certainly, we have to protect the rights of the private property owners, and to me, that's paramount. At the same time, we need to also allow the public utilities to purchase electricity at the cheapest rate possible, which we are manipulating the market right now, as you know, Kathy. We subsidize these alternative energy plans, and I'm all for looking, diversifying where we get our energy from, but not if they can't stand on their own 2 feet. And right now, we mandate the public utilities to generate a percentage of their energy from these alternative energy, which we're just subsidizing as ratepayers. People wonder why the rates are so high. Well, because we have all these regulations on the public utilities right now. We have to allow them more flexibility to go after energy at the cheapest rates possible.
Now, I mean, and there's so many issues, and I'm sure your head probably almost bursts that there are so many things to think of when you're running for governor.
Right.
And there's also a lot of things for the voters to think of. So we, unfortunately, because of the time aspects, have to kind of bang through some of them. But healthcare
Kathy,
continues.
You're the host. You do it the way you want to do it.
No, but I want you to be able to,
Absolutely.
to answer. Healthcare certainly continues to be a major concern. Do you think that the state of New Hampshire should join the federal lawsuit with the other states to remove our forced participation in Obamacare?
Absolutely, and I'll tell you why. Because Obamacare did nothing to address the cost of health care. And if Obamacare were to be fully implemented in this state by the year 2020, it could cost us anywhere from $10 to $20 billion. That's double the size of the state budget. We can't incur those costs. And again, there's another mandate out of Washington, and not thinking at all about the states and the taxpayers in those states and who's going to pay for this program. Hopefully by the time I'm governor, that plan will be off the table, that the Supreme Court will will have already made a ruling on it. But certainly, if it's not, yes, I definitely would want to make sure that the state of New Hampshire wouldn't join in that particular lawsuit.
Now, having said that, though, do you think we do need some insurance reform in the state?
We do. Well, two of the things I've talked about, I mean, we have no competition in this state right now with health insurance carriers. We've driven them essentially all out of this state because of all the mandates that we put on in the late 90s and the early 2000s. So I'd like to see us be able to do one is allow consumers and businesses to purchase health insurance across state lines. The more you create competition and open up the free markets and they start competing with one another, the more rates are going to start coming down.
How many companies do we have right now selling
there's essentially
health insurance?
2.
That's it?
Yeah, essentially 2 companies. We had over 20 a decade ago. But again, we've driven them all out because of the mandates that we've put on as a state. And the other thing I would like to do...
Were those legislative mandates?
They were all legislative mandates. The other thing what I would like to see us do is allow the health insurance companies to be able to offer alternative plans. So they can offer the plans with the mandates, which is still abiding by state law, but then offer alternative plans to employees that maybe don't want all of the mandates, don't need all of the mandates, so that they can purchase health insurance at a lower cost, or that businesses can purchase it. What good is it having all these mandates and insurance if no one can afford it? Businesses, they're seeing their premiums go up 30-40% every year, which means they're offering their employees less and less. The employees are having to pay in more because of all the mandates that are in there. I mean, there's a cost to doing this kind of business, and and this is where, again, there's often a disconnect between legislators who are making this policy and then the reality of what the costs mean. So it's something that we do need to reform here in the state.
I know one of the things you've also talked about is upgrading the state's technology infrastructure, which brings me to the news we all heard the past, 24, 48 hours, that there are all kinds of people getting Medicare and food stamps who are not, in fact, residing in New Hampshire.
Right.
Do you see that infrastructure improvement tying right into that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It would tie right into it. In fact, before this report came out, I had met with former Commissioner John Stephen, who was a former gubernatorial candidate. And I know John from having worked under John for 2 years at HHS. And one of the things he said to me was, he said, Kevin, the state needs a massive overhaul of its current technology. We need better technology to catch a lot of these problems. And this was before the report even came out. But there's a direct tie-in between us not being able to catch a lot of this fraud. I mean, it took an independent group to come in, study this, and tell us, you guys get a big problem on your hands.
And to me, there's something wrong with that picture.
Well, there is. There is something wrong with that picture.
Yeah.
As a state, we ought to be catching this stuff.
Yeah.
And if the reason we're not catching it is because we don't have the technology to do it, well, guess what? If we can invest $10 million in doing a technology upgrade so that we can catch $40 million in fraud, well, that's worth it. It's worth doing it that way.
You're right. Well, Kevin, as you can see, that clock is ticking madly, and I could talk to you for another hour. So I will ask you, A, will you come back again? And B, I'm sure you're planning on winning the nomination, so I want a commitment from you. You'll come back then as well.
Kathy, I will be back as many times as you'd like
Well,
me back.
I'm going to take you up on that because there's a whole more topics.
I'll definitely be back again before the primary, and certainly if I end up winning the nomination, I'll be happy to come back.
All right, we are literally almost out of time. So what I want to do is this. I want, if you can do it in 4 or 5 words, if somebody says, what's the biggest difference between you and your Republican opponent? Tell me.
I have better ideas. I have a proven record of leadership. I know the state inside and out, having served in the legislative branch, the executive branch, made good reforms in a state agency, fought for good policies on the outside, and I've got the substance and specific ideas for how we're going to make the state of New Hampshire the most economically competitive state in the country.
I am definitely going to have you back again. We are out of time. I want everybody to remember that website, www.kevinsmithforgovernor.com. Go on there. You can find out where he's going to be so you can meet him, hear him, read his platform. We will continue to tell it like it is. Kevin will be back to tell it like it is again. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.